with me. They have real books behind. I have only a virtual library behind. So those are the real leaders. And I'm just trying to be on their path. So first, let me introduce the two stalwarts whom I have. So I take this opportunity to introduce Mr. ADIL MALIA. ADIL is a doyen in the field of HR, and he's an alumni of TIS, and also a lawyer, if some of you don't know. He's also studied in the Wharton Business School. He's currently the chief executive of the firm as he started his own venture, but that's really not ADIL. He's very well known in our HR circles. He's a TEDx speaker. He's a leader with really a golden heart, and he's got a lot of fan following, and he's been a mentor to many, including me. And prior to being in the firm, he was, ADIL was the director of Southwest Asia with Coca-Cola, and he was the group president for the entire group of Essar, which was then the heydays of Essar. And of course, it is, so ADIL, thank you very much for accepting this invite and being with us. And I have Rajesh. It's an honor to introduce Rajesh as a panelist. He's a stalwart in the field of HR, and Rajesh is one of the few human resources professionals who's also a banker, who knows his numbers very well. So he is somebody who's been a CHRO for many, many reputed organizations like Capgemini, with iGate, and he's been the group chief executive and the board on Vedanta, and the director HR of Welspun. I remember now Rajesh has decided to hang up his boots, but this is something which he's decided before, and I kept telling him, Rajesh, you have too much to give back to society and to the human resources. But I think now he's decided to go on a new venture, so that's Rajesh. So I will start by asking ADIL, what does new age HR mean to you, the topic? ADIL, you're on mute. Can you hear me? Okay, Rajesh, I'll just turn that question to you. ADIL, can you
yes. Yeah, I can unmute myself now.
Please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. 1 second, I'm again gone. Da-da-da, da-da-da. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
All right, sorry for this, because I think I got a message saying that the host has muted me, and I should thank you. Good afternoon to you, and I should thank you, Tanaya, for such a wonderful introduction. Rather than going through any of that, let me say that I wish all of you a very, very interesting times, and may we all live in interesting times. And the story behind this greeting of saying, may you have interesting time, is also very interesting. So apparently, you know, what is interesting and in terms of the change paradigm is very unique, where all the old actually prefer to continue and have status quo, and they believe that anything that is disturbing their status quo is not so interesting. And on the other hand, their young children and the young of the country at any point of time are those who find status quo very, very boring. And therefore, they believe that interesting is something that disturbs the status quo and gets into a new exciting zone. So actually, at some point of time, to resolve this conflict, the Chinese, and this is picked up from the Chinese mythology, where the Chinese old wish the Chinese young, may you live in interesting times. That is to say, not that anything very interesting, but to say that may the interesting times not disturb your status quo so badly that you may start being in a state of pain. Now, what I'm going to be doing actually today, and I thought what I would do is share with you a very, very a kind of a framework which I'm very, very comfortable whenever we are talking about change transformation. And that's a kind of framework, even in the current situation, which we have been recommending to some of our clients. And I thought that even at the cost of cannibalizing my business, because Tanaya is such a good friend, I will go ahead and share my format with you so that there is a common learning and there is a common understanding of that framework, which I strongly believe that most of the companies or most of the leaders in any organization, and particularly some of you who are members of faculties who will be training people who in the future will be leading this kind of changes, should be aware of. So in this framework, actually, the organizational transformational journey goes through 4 classical phases. One is called discovery. The second is called the design stage, dream stage. The third is called the design stage. And fourth is the destination stage. So between these 4D stages, there are several sub-stages which are going on, and I will take you through it. In the discovery stage of transformation generally, what organizations do is they try to establish that where are we today before we embark on the change journey. All right, so that's the discovery. You discover yourself. Where are you? What are you doing? How good or how bad is the current situation for you? Now, this situation is when you are in a steady state wanting to transform your organization to a new state that you desire to go to. But now this is a peculiar situation. We are living in this age of the black swan events, and black swan events generally are not events which you generally are able to see. And I'm sure being academicians, you are aware of what the black swan events are. And this indeed is a black swan event. So therefore, we suddenly find ourselves discovering a situation which we had not even anticipated, whilst we had all imagined at a point of time that some such changes would happen. But currently, this situation has prompted us to move into that state very, very fast. From the discovery stage, we have to go to the dream stage, and from dream to design, and from design to the new destination. But in the discovery stage, which is the first stage of transformation, and as I said, uniquely as we find ourselves in this stage, there are 2 situations which we are going to be confronted as leaders. Because whatever we are going to talk about, we are going to say, if we find ourselves in this situation, what is it that we as leaders or leaders of men, how are we going to be leading organizations to move from the current state to where we want to take the organization in the future? Please, for a minute, do not believe that when the world is going to open out, the next day when you go to work is going to be 19th March. All right, it is not going to be 19th March. It is a new world. And even if half the world is wanting to go back to continuity from the state they left it to, that would be a blunder, because the Kumbh Karan has been woken up. And the Kumbh Karan has now realized that the value chain of the organization can be actually fulfilled with a much different design, a much different model, in a much different business landscape than to go back into the continuity of where we left it on March 18. So the first stage is called the twilight zone of obscurity. What happens in this stage when you are in this discovery stage in a situation we find ourselves? It is like the dark ages. Whenever any change of the nature that you are facing, you confront that, the first stage is the stage of the dark ages. Now, even if you look at the history and if you look at the Roman Empire, and after the collapse of the Roman Empire, for 300 years, because the collapse was so heavy, for 300 years, the world experienced what is called the dark ages, and then came in what is called the ages of the Renaissance. So dark ages, when people are absolutely after the impact, in a state of shock, in a state of ambiguity, in a state of fear and collapse, no one knows what to do. They are looking forward for leadership. Everything that existed, everything that is prevailing is not giving the same responses. All the processes, programs, and tools which you are using are actually failing out. And therefore, there is a mass confusion in this stage of discovery. The leader at this point of time is supposed to be not doing anything much, because the leader is equally blinded by the newness of the situation. And therefore, at this point of time, he is supposed to be giving in a certain element of confidence, a certain element of familiarity, a certain element of use my shoulders and talk to me. We will collectively find a way together kind of a situation. And that's the first stage of what we call the twilight zone of obscurity, which is one part of the discovery zone. The second is what we call the zone of sustenance. So as soon as this discovery period is over, and what we are now going to be looking at, that we are trying to unlock the situation, and we are going stages to stages, trying to unlock the situation, that is the state of the zone of sustenance. At this point, you know, what happens is that you cannot imagine. One of the worst things that organizations should do is they should never try to restructure at the discovery stage at all. There is a need to rediscover and restructure the organization, but that comes much later in the dream and the design stage. So if companies go into thinking like, I'm going to cut the organization size, I'm going to not pay salaries, I'm going to take away the leaves and wages, and which is what we keep hearing in the industry, absolutely the wrong thing happening at the wrong point of time. In the discovery stage, there is already such a big anxiety. And in that stage of anxiety, if a leader was to go around doing the restructuring of the organization just to save on a little bit of cost, I promise you, you are supplying oxygen to the toxic part of the body in an operation at a very, very wrong stage of time. And anyone who even understands basic surgery will not do that as a process. So in the zone of sustenance, there are two things that happen. Now, if you know psychology, and most of you would be also professors of psychology, between a physical stimulation, there is an immediate stimulation and immediate response. But in a psychological state, the immediate stimulation is met by an interim stage called evaluation. And post-evaluation, you come to the stage which is either reaction or immediate state of normalization. So what happens is that it is time for organizations from reaction to response. So there are two things happening in psychology. In the intermediary stage, there is a certain normalization that happens. And after that, there are two situations, reactions and response. So if a person is reacting to the situation, which means he's not thinking about it and he's moving mindlessly into the situation, to response, which is an evaluated action. And that is exactly what happens in psychology of change. And therefore, in the zone of sustenance, the leader is supposed to bring the people of his organization or the people who are going through the dark periods from a state of void to a state of choice. Means generally they start believing, oh God, it is a state of doomsday. We are going to be destroyed. We are going to be over. We are finished. To a state of choice that nothing is over. Maybe we don't go back to that old state, but we are going to go back to the new stage. And there are two alternatives to the human mind in psychology. One is called a trivialization, and the other is called terribilization. Trivialization means you will find people who will say there is nothing, no problem at all. This is all overdone. This is all political gimmickry. This is Chinese domination over the world economics. Trivialize it. And the other is on the extreme end of it is called terribilization. Terribilization means, oh my God, we are over. There is nothing remaining. Whole business is going to collapse. India is going to die. World is going, this is Armageddon. We are going to all die. It's going to be over, destroyed. So terribilization and trivialization are the two extreme ends. And a leader in this stage is supposed to bring in what is called the stage of normalization, which is neither terribilization nor trivialization, but practical normalization of what the situation is and how will we take it. After the discovery stage and in the framework that we recommend to organizations, and of course we make leaders understand and take them through each of the stages as if we are holding their hands and making them do what ideally they should have been doing, we bring to the second stage called the dream stage, which is a zone of inclusive engagement. First, in terms of auditing as to now what has really happened, where have we gone wrong, which of our systems are not working, which tools are failing, how is our purpose impacted, how is our vision that we were doing on 18th March, how is that vision impacted, are our values in place or not, or they are also impacted. Suddenly you will find that, organizations which were talking to their people all along till that point that we are all part of one big Vasudeva Kutumba. We are all family, we're going to take care of. At the strike of the dawn on 19th are talking about, can we cut people? Can we, now no one is thinking in terms of what is happening to them, but everyone is thinking in terms of how do we voice the organizational business case more than advocacy of people. And that kind of value systems and the culture of the organization which they were going suddenly go through a schizophrenic change and swing on to the other side. And even the organization's capabilities, which they used to pride for the value creation journey, gets impacted at this point. So in the dream stage, what you're doing is you're re-looking at it and bringing it to the next stage to say, where is it that what is it that we want to do now, having found ourselves into this stage? And that is when you bring into what is called the design stage, from the dream stage to the design stage. At the design stage, the organization and its leadership goes into design thinking. What is the new landscape that's emerging in light of the new situation and the new technology and the new challenges? What are the new business models? How is the technology going to help us? What are the behavioral economics, or what is the humanizing of the new opportunity, the new tools and the people? How is the samanvay of these three going to happen in the revisioning, strategy and calibration? And the last stage from design comes to the stage of destination, or the stage of the ultimate journey that the organization has to move in. How do we matricize? How do we scorecardize the organization? How do we create a sense of rededication? How do we strategically connect our people to the new purpose as they were connected to the old purpose? How do we strategically re-engage our people? And how do we execute our programs and plans so that we rebuild the organization from the destroyed state that we find ourselves in to the new state of the new business model that we are taking into? So this is the kind of overarching framework in which the organization will have to manage its transformation and its change. And therefore, the leader needs to be equipped, trained, competent, capable, astute, and what we call a quiet leader. And quiet leadership is a model we'll talk about at a later point of time. But that's the kind of journey and the framework you will have to follow. So Tanaya, does it give a certain kind of a framework to talk upon?
Oh, perfect. That's really so brilliant. And no wonder I didn't know that March 19th was, where the Kumbhakarna was awakened, and we moved from something called terribilization, and then finally to the design stage, and finally the destination stage. In this background, Rajesh, what is the new paradigm in terms of leadership capabilities, do you think? Particularly, since you've gone through so many different kinds and types of organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Tanaya, at the outset. Absolutely a delight to be here with you and Adil. And I hope I'm coming across clear. Just by a show of hands should be good enough. Yeah. Okay. So first and foremost, thank you for a gracious introduction and a superb opening by Adil anyway. So I'm following this. And to be specific with your particular comments, there are a few stuff that I think are absolutely crucial leadership transformational capabilities that one would need to work on. Let me run my mind. I think the first and foremost is what I would call as, and completely dovetailing into what Adil said, the first one is in huge influencing capabilities. Let me speak a little bit more about influencing capabilities. I think to drive this entire transformation, you can't be managing transformation. First and foremost is tackling the mindset and having massive amounts of influencing capabilities. The more and more we get into the mindset of managing people, I think lesser will be the transformation needle that will move. So obviously, I think one needs to really bring in three quotients, which we all know and knew. I think I'm bringing the fourth quotient. So along with the physical quotient, the intellectual quotient, the emotional quotient, there is a fourth quotient, which is the adversity quotient, which needs to really be played out beautifully for one to really influence and make that entire move. It's a soft skill, it's a hard skill as well, and one should know how to really make this happen. That's number one. Number two is the conventional one, which is like, making things happen. Making things happen, high amount of executional rigor and making things happen, taking it across the finishing line, so very critical. I think there are multiple things happening at this point of time, many failures as well. I think it's important to really make things happen and cross that particular line to really figure out an outcome of success or a failure. But executional rigor and make things happen is the second one that I would say. Third one, needless to say, everybody is counting money at this stage. I think commercial acumen is something absolutely crucial. You can't be running away from it. I mean, absolutely heads on. You have to face that situation very clearly. I think there's cost and money on the table. You've got to make a lot of business sense and prudence. And as you introduced me, I think money is something that strikes very quickly for me. Anything with respect to transformation, one has got to see that very clearly. The fourth one is reinforcing culture. And Adil did allude to that particular point. It's so very essential. When we are blending this entire, high tech and high touch, I think it's so very essential when the world is turned, God knows whether it's turned 90 or 360 or 180, but the world has changed. I think there's a huge amount of cultural reinforcement that's needed. Are we still, together in this entire unified vision? Are we really reaching out? Is there a cause for humanity and care that we are really demonstrating, along with some of the harder ones that we are facing with respect to whatever, call it optimization, delayering, downsizing, whatever that keep happening? Are we really playing it in tandem? Are we really doing it well? So the cultural part of it will come into play. You must have spoken a lot about culture, but are you really walking the talk? And the single measure of really testing out culture, according to me, is, are you treating employees the way you would treat customers in this situation? I think that's the ideal measure. If you're able to do that, I think then you really hold out very well in the eyes of everyone. That's the fourth one. The fifth one is, of course, I think one needs to be very, very different. You need to give a lot of space to your innovation and design thinking at this stage. I think there's a lot of stuff that you need to view at, looking at very positively and figure it out as opportunities. The more and more you see things as opportunities, I think you make the entire organization move forward. Yes, I think the whole system is bogged down to look at cost structures, but I think there's also the time to figure out, at least with a reasonable amount of customer reach, as to how to look at growth repositioning also. Everybody will say that the entire visioning is so blurred, nobody knows life beyond this, but winners clearly will see opportunities as well. I mean, look at Reliance. I think they have seen an opportunity, and look at the way they've grown as far as this entire adversity is concerned. The valuation has gone exceedingly high. They have seen massive opportunities of bringing things together. They have done a deal in this adversity. So I think winners clearly demonstrate that differently. The sixth one is digital. I think it's possibly the most abused word after strategy in management. Very few people understand what digital is, and people use this entire word for technology. I think one has got to understand there are just 4 simple things if you really need to understand what digital is all about. Digital uses technology, but has to deliver a unique customer value proposition or an experience, has got to make your processes agile. It has to lead to business valuation and enterprise valuation. If this entire flow is not happening, for God's sake, don't use the word technology. Just running a few enterprise systems here and there, moving a few legacy systems and building apps is not digital alone. I think digital is this entire ecosystem of this particular business. One needs to understand how to position this. And this digital is something which is like very crucial for the entire ecosystem to understand if you've got to make a stride forward in this particular era. I'm happy to talk more about it, time permitting, but I think I've just struck the point. The 7th one is emotional intelligence. Needless to say, I think one needs to balance it out. A huge amount of emotional intelligence that will need to be relayed across the organization. I keep calling it like from the chairman to the workman. Everybody needs to understand this part of it, how to really play out everything together, how to really bring out your emotions and behavior at the same time, very significantly, at the same time, making it very emphatically and also result oriented, business sense. I think so many things will need to be factored. So I think emotional intelligence possibly is at its peak of need. Agility and adaptability. I think while a lot of us will show agility, I think there are a few areas that you may have to give in as well as adaptability. I think Adil beautifully outlined those 4, D's, and that he brought up. I think that many situations will also tell us that, just be at peace with yourself. I don't think this is the time to be fighting ourselves. This is also the time to be befriending ourselves. I don't think we've had too much of time to doing internal reflection. So I think there's a massive amount of adaptability also that will need to come in. I think the world is at a rush of agility, but agility and adaptability are like, 2 sides of the same coin in my view. The 9th one is hard skilling. I think a lot of us have been talking about development across for leadership. I think, and I fundamentally have been, challenging this. I think this is the time to expose leadership to hard skilling. It is not to be driven by objectives or to be driven by review systems or to be driven by, the Darbar meetings. It's a very different kind of world. So you need to really drive this through hard skilling. And I think, let's face it, as we go up the pyramid, I think leadership has been a little scared about the disruption of digital and technology and handling transformation. So I guess they need to be hard skilled and not just developed on this one. And finally, the last one is the world of predictives. I think you've got to clearly understand and take some calculated and reasonable position. Nobody knows the future. I think it's like, really cliche. One would say, I really know and I'm planning well. Nobody knows. but winners clearly take a reasonable amount of position. You can build a lot of algorithms and mathematical models within whatever parameters and dimensions that you have and take those positions. And people who take the enterprises who take that position will clearly be, front-ended winners. So Tanaya, I think these are the 10 dimensions that I thought will be relevant for the positioning of today. And hopefully I've dovetailed into what Adil said and connected this for you to, give me your feedback as well.
Oh, perfect. So that's a 10 on 10. So on one side, we're talking of digitization, we're talking of emotional quotient, and we're talking of hard skilling. On the other hand, Adil, you mentioned that, there are pay cuts. The same Reliance that we spoke about is also planning to have pay cuts for some of its division, the hydrocarbon division, may not be the other ones. So in this scenario, Adil, what percepts will the new culture have to reflect in order to succeed in the new business landscape, which nobody really knows?
So, Tanaya, before I answer your question, because, we are also into a kind of a common jam session between Rajesh and us, and the idea is a collective learning for the group. I also want to add on to what he has said. Whilst, of course, everyone has a worldview from his windows, and Rajesh has a view of the 10 points from his windows, and I would have had done it in a different way from my window. And of course, around 4 of them are very, very similar, but there are 3 very uniquely different, which I want to mention because they are very relevant. Number one is that leadership until now, and this is our experience of being in consulting and at the corporate board level roles for all our practically 40 years of our career, we have been out there. Number one is that there is a tendency of senior leadership to be blinded by what we call the Pareto monster. Sitting on the table at any given point of time is a Pareto monster who represents 80% of the problem that the organization perceives for itself as the problem to its value creation journey. Now, the experience in organizations is that leadership is so bothered about proving its efficiencies in the short run that disproportionate amount of resources, disproportionate amount of time, disproportionate amount of energy is put in to resolve that Pareto analysis, and actually no energy is put in to resolve those small nascent problems which at a given point of time compared to the Pareto monster are looking nascent, but have the potential to one day grow into those big black swan events, which when they were small could have been resolved at half the time and cost, but because of the sheer negligence have grown to become the big problem. So the leadership maturity of trying to balance out its energies, resources, and focus on solving the problem is disproportionately high for a Pareto monster compared to a potential black swan contributor, which is one of the things the leader of the future will have to be mindful of. The second most important thing, I think, and of course, I agree with Rajesh on most of the point, but one of the most important things I believe is that your ability to stage gate the process, and there are 3 skill sets that he will need to have to be able to manage and steer the stage gate that I was talking about. One is process championship. Whilst I have spoken about it, and I promise you that leaders who are capable of only running their current businesses efficiently are not necessarily those who will be able to manage a change transformation. They are very, very good at running their value chains effectively. They are very effective in trying to making the money at that point of time as what the business plan is. But their ability to lead the change or their ability to manage the change is certainly not there. Therefore, number one is process championship in managing transformation, because we are going to keep facing these kind of black swan events now very frequently. It is not going to be once in a while. It is going to be so frequently that by the time you came out of monetization, by the time you came out of the bank crisis, by the time you now have got pandemic, and another thing you don't know which will come out. So therefore, your process championship in managing change, your maniacal drive, and your resilience, your ability to rise like a phoenix because you are working on an undefined territory, not that you also as a leader or the organization knows the answer and you are bound to falter, at that point of time, your ability to rise like a phantom and once again go on to the journey is very important. So everything Rajesh shared plus these 2-3 things.
Okay, so what do you think will be the new culture, therefore?
So number one is, let me say that, most of the corporates don't understand culture, and most of the books that you read, I sometimes feel very, very shocked when I read the books on culture and the way they define culture. Most of them, it looks like, have not understood culture, have picked up the sociological definition of culture and tried to apply their intelligence and mind to bring in into a corporate context and define sociological cultural concepts into corporate domain. Now, as a human body, we all know that every human body has got 11 systems: the digestive system, the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, etc., etc. So whether you are a Britisher, you're an American, a woman, a man, anybody, there are 11 systems which have got to be present, which have got to be working in a certain pattern so that the man can be a healthy living human being. Likewise, organizations also have very critically 8 organizational systems, irrespective of whether they are in this continent or any other continent, whether they are small or they are big, whether they are manufacturing or non-manufacturing, whether they are made in India or made in China. Every organization needs to have those 8 systems in place. Order to remittance, new product introduction, supply chain management, quick market intelligence, cash flow management, business planning and review, brand management, and new technology introductions. These are the 8 processes every organization needs to have. Now, the way the organization uniquely goes around managing these critical 8 processes, the values, the decision-making process, the line of thinking, the empowerment, that defines the culture of the organization. So culture of the organization is the way it continues managing the 8 critical value creation processes of the organization by virtue of its leadership and people management processes. What do we now find ourselves in the line of 18th March as one parameter before COVID and 19th March after COVID? What is the cultural challenges that we will have? So number one is, we need to be very clearly understanding that rigidity is gone, and rigidity will have to bring in flexible cultures. The second is, whenever there was an alien person who had come into the old system, the rigidity would tend to eject the person out. You are not like us. We do it here in this particular way. You are suggesting a different way. We blockade you. And Tanaya, you and I have had discussions that there are rigid organizations which not only reject the person, they eject him. Not only reject, but eject the person out if the person brings in a cultural practice or a pattern which is totally different. Versus adoption of the new culture and the new practices will now be the real mandated way out. Resistance to technology, which we have seen, and most of the classical organizations, the legacy organizations that we have seen, are those who have rejected technology. They still want to go back, and there is a very beautiful book by Talib called Fooled by Randomness. Most Indian organizations of a legacy nature have all along believed that what they did in the past, as a result of which they got success, they are fooled by the randomness of their success to believe that they will repeat the same thing and naturally the success will happen. But the ecosystem and the enabling environment being now different will not necessarily make them succeed the same way it made them succeed in the olden times. Now, outcome was more important in the old culture, processes were not. So irrespective of process, if I want this outcome, that outcome is the culture of the organization. You show me the face and I will tell you the process was the way in which it got done. And that has gone through a 360 degrees change, 180 degrees change, not 360. 360 comes back to the same situation. 180 degrees change from that cultural point of view. And earlier, they used to manage more and more by guts and insight, versus now big data analysis and evidence-based success is going to define what the culture should prevail in the organization. So a very long-winded answer to a very nice and small question you asked me.
No, I agree with you, Adil. And in fact, I think that as we grow in organizations, or as organizations come back to normalcy, I think this is something which is the DNA of organizations, which is very difficult to define. But very honestly, once you walk into any organization, you can actually make out the difference, you know. So I think
The vibrations will make out. The sheer vibrations that are prevailing in the organization when you walk will tell you the culture of the enterprise.
Absolutely. And that's really, how one is able to rise, or one is able to, the system ejects it out. So that's really what it is. Okay, Rajesh, coming back to you. So what do you think is the, in this entire bit of culture, what is the role of learning to build the new organization? Because it requires a different skill sets. And you did speak about, digital change, and you did talk about building new capabilities. You talked about hard skilling. So what is really the new reality, and what is the role of learning in all of this?
I think the learning organization right now is possibly at its biggest metamorphosis of change. I think it's feeling so. There's a lot of positive movements and lot of areas which are still in transition, and there are a few things which have come as challenges. If I were to look at it today, the entire aspect of learning, which we have been advocating in the corporate world for too long, I think the virtual part of it, the e-learning part of it is all done with. But empowering the learnees more is something that has actually happened through COVIDization. So we have actually digitally empowered the learnees. So they've started feeling the content, they've started owning the time, they've started owning the delivery. So I think that's something. So self is the first change that I see. Number two, it's become much more immersive. We've been talking about immersive learning for a while. I think one can feel the real impact of having made it immersive. Of course, things like gamification, MOOCs, and the entire aspect of bit-sized learning will make it much more impactful, because the attention span is going to be limited. So small microbit learning modules really make it effective. But the point that I'm trying to make is, while a lot of the entire learning management system has undergone change, and while in large enterprises you have the LMS which takes care of the entire process flow as far as learning is concerned, the biggest challenge that I see is the entire connectedness to the talent architecture, connecting some of the points of change that I spoke about. So conventionally, I think talent architecture used to sit in the talent management window, and learning used to own more of the curriculum, content, flow, design, delivery of the learning part of it. That's how the architecture was. Now, I guess the entire capability building architecture is something which the learning organizations will need to own much before, because the talent organization is not something that's going to hand over to you readily. So the ownership of the entire talent architecture gets co-owned between the talent management and the learning right now. So the learning core part of it has actually moved a few inches more strategically into the talent architecture. That's number one. The delivery, the content, the top-ups, all of that will actually start moving out, because there's not too much of scope available in the enterprises for learning delivery, learning admin, the entire, the content management, and all of that can easily be outsourced. There are a lot of experts and plenty of companies and plenty of specialized outfits available today. And in fact, a lot of product companies have also come up which can actually enable you and get the entire tech in place as well. So learning is possibly one organization, one function which has actually moved very dynamically in the marketplace. It's for one to really own this and really develop it as a center of expertise, the design part of it, the curriculum part of it, thinking about the new age capabilities, and to design it today and to really get it right and keep moving it dynamically is what learning will need to do. So learning will really need to play out the center of expertise role, and a lot of it will actually move to the other part of it. And if companies do have shared services, I believe they will start taking over that part of the learning organization, because a lot of business as usual as far as learning is concerned is happening as well. So this is my view on the entire enterprise learning shifts. Yeah, and this is where possibly the organization gets a little divided. Yeah, and they will need to go through this entire change. Happy to talk more if you need.
Yes, sure, Rajesh. In fact, my experience is that, with this change that's happening around, what is happening is a lot of reskilling is, needs to happen, because the entire world of what we were in is changing. So therefore, a lot of reskilling, a lot of, trying to unskilling, or rather unlearning, and ensuring that, one moves up the ladder, because you see the environment is changing. You just said, you know, the digital is so different. So I think the entire learning piece is going to undergo a rapid change. So Adil, in this background, in the VUCA world of today, how does one attempt at making really a people strategy in sync with all of this? And what do you think are some of the critical tenets?
So whether it's technology, non-technology, it is very, very important to understand that people will continue to be the prime centrifugal force around which organizations' value creation journeys will exist. Whilst technology may aid it in one way, whilst there may be multiple business models, the new business landscapes that we may talk about, somewhere down the line, all of these modifications in the organization's life cycles and its processes will still be centrifugally driven by people who will be at the center of the value creation journey. Maybe lesser number of people, maybe differently skilled people, maybe differently competent people, but people will be there at the center of the value creation journey. Now, there are two very, very important things, and I will be also touching a little bit on the learning organization, as my friend Rajesh has said, and he has so brilliantly said all of that. So number one is that most people in organizations mistake learning to be training. And they, HR departments, Tanaya, between you and me, is the only department in the world which has created value for itself by changing its name. So it continued to do certain things which it used to call administration department. It continues to do the same thing. It called itself personnel department. It continued to do the same thing, called itself HR department. It continued to do the same, called itself OD department. It continued to do the same, calls itself people department. It continues to do the same thing, calls itself learning department. The activities continue to remain same. We have created value by changing name, and therefore the credibility certainly sucks because that's not what is expected. Every organization, to be able to be successful in its value creation journey, needs to have certain capabilities, organizational capabilities, and they should not be mistaken to be competencies. Competencies are different, organizational capabilities are different. So every organization has certain unique capabilities which are far more differentiated than the capabilities of its competitive space in which it is creating value. And therefore, it needs to have a continued edge in that space. Now, competencies are coming from people who are supposed to have certain competencies to be able to create value out of the organizational capability where they are hired to generate value for the stakeholders and shareholders. So it is very, very important for us to differentiate, because you may continue doing, whether you change the platform, you call it e-learning, you call it everything, you call it machine language, you call it machine learning. If you continue to do what you were doing in your classroom training programs and now offer to them on an e-learning platform the same thing, you cannot say that because I'm using an electronic platform, we call it learning instead of training. And that would be the most foolish death knell that we would give to the learning organization. So therefore, that recognition that when change is happening, when organizations' paradigms are shifting, and in the new paradigm, organizations require a new set of capabilities at that point of time, whether the organization now needs to hire new people, whether it needs to strategically engage its existing people differently, or it needs to get new sets of people. And how do you build the capability, competencies of the individuals so that the new capabilities that the organizations require are all going to be available for the organization to create value? So in fact, Tanaya, we have jocularly also discussed, and in most of the articles I have said, and then this is more of a joke than anything else, so don't take me at my hubris or something. In a changed organization, an organization which has agility, which has drive, which believes in innovation, and which believes in learning, ADIL, which coincidentally happens to be my name, if the organization has ADIL, you'll be able to succeed. So that's jocular. But the idea is that learning is so important because knowledge and processes of the organization outdate themselves at a pace you can't imagine. If I were to ever be asked by a student or my son or anyone, give me that one piece of knowledge which will sustain me forever and ever, I won't be able to give. But what I can really do is make him learn, teach him how to learn. Learn to learn is the most important capability that individuals and organizations will have. Because knowledge will outdate itself. There is no one knowledge which will be forever sustaining as itself as the ultimate knowledge in the world. But your ability to learn, will determine your success.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Tanaya, can I come in? I just want to close that people strategy part of it my own way. Can I do that?
Yes, of course.
Just give me a couple of minutes. And having come from the business, I think I just want to offer a little bit of a dimension to this. Since you asked me what is the correlation between people strategy and business strategy, I'll simplify this by using my own terminologies, which I call the 4C model. And I'll possibly elaborate this 4C model. The first one, I think you've spoken in.
He has it as ADIL.
Sorry?
I said he has it as ADIL, so I was thinking you're going to come up with something called Rajesh.
Yeah.
That would be too long, so he's decided to do 4 Cs.
Okay, go on. Sorry, the 4 Cs.
Luckily, I have the advantage of a small name.
Speaking is a function of how many books you've read. So, look at his library, look at my library. So that's why the answer is okay. That's why we made you the moderator. Huh? He said that, okay, you keep quiet now because you know far too much. Anyway, so coming to the 4C model of people strategy, I think the first and foremost is the culture part of it. We've spoken a lot about it, but how do we really reinforce values? How do we recognize, support, reach out, balance this entire humanity, care along with business? That's the culture part of it. We've spoken enough. I really don't want to spend too much of time. The second one, again, we've spoken a lot, which is the capabilities. But I want to add a little bit of a dimension to it by cutting the entire organization into 3 levels. So at the lowmost level, I think there's a lot of base level skilling which has got to be connected with tech literacy. I think so. I'm getting a little practical now from a business standpoint, number 1. Number 2 is at the middle level, you really need to manage the tech and touch, because they're going to manage people and they're going to manage tech change as well. So you need a right blended model at the middle level. At the senior level, I think there's an infusion of complete digital literacy, multi-skilling, liquid leadership, because people really will need to manage a lot of stuff which they're possibly unaware of, what needs to be skilled. So that's so far as capabilities are concerned. And the third one that I'm talking, the third C, is contribution, in my view. I think for decades, we have been measuring performance, which is the effort, but I think it's come to a stage where I think contribution is becoming very relevant. What is the role of HR and how can really HR contribute and enable the top line, the middle line, and the bottom line and the cash is something very, very essential. You've got to get into a little bit of quantifiable HR. I think that's something which actually will have a lot of demand now. I think you will have a lot of quantitative guys, just as you have a lot of data science guys and the analytics guys entering the digital stream. You will have a lot of quantifiable guys who will be able to connect this. And the last one is the credibility, the 4th C that I call it. And credibility is not just the commercial business, but the how part of it. The social business is also becoming important. What you do is possibly less important than how you do today. I think that's becoming very, very important. And both the internal credibility with respect to displacing engagements with experience and with respect to, displacing the entire external social engagement models with something very new, where you're able to really speak about, what is that you're doing out large, very openly. And one needs to see that you're really blending the commercial models and the social models together. So again, just coming back, culture, capability, contribution, and credibility. I think it's the 4 business linkages that I want to say.
Tanaya, sorry, can I add on before you bring a conclusion? And very beautifully, this people versus technology kind of a conflict that we are talking about is resolved by a very beautiful ancient quote, and it's an Urdu quote, and let me quote it for you because it brings a resolution to it. It says, "Muktasar si zindagi ke bas yahi afsane hain, yahan tir bhi chalane hain aur parindo ko bhi bachana hai." Look at the beauty of it. We have to ensure that we will succeed in the new paradigm and learn new things. At the same time, we have to remember that we are people We are a human organization. We are a entire human-based civilization. So we have to protect our people at the same time as we progress with our business plans and industry.
Mashallah, mashallah. Adil. Super, very nice. Very nice.
Anyways, so I'm not going to get both of you just speak about the corporate world since we have so many academicians here. So Rajesh, my next question to you is, and it's really for the audience, what do you see as the gaps between what the industry expects and what the management students come with? So since all of them are academicians, they would definitely want an answer from both of you as stalwarts.
So if I've understood your question right, what is the message to the teaching profs and what is the message to the students?
What happens is, when as a group CHRO, both of you, you are expecting a certain quality to come in. So what do you see as the gaps?
Okay, so first and foremost, I think the clear gap that's going to emerge is the entire aspect of employment. I guess all of us are very clearly aware. I'll get to the employability part of it a little later, since I do some amount of work for CIA at the back end as well, very aware of what the ratios are, how the entire planning is going to come into play, and what are some of the emerging levels, and what are the overall densities of people that we are really populating at a national level. So clearly, I think employment is one area which is going to be left a little behind. I think the entire teaching staff owes it to their students in terms of clearly making them aware as to what are the emerging spaces coming and what are the emerging industries, whether it's drones or logistics or entertainment or gamification, very clear IT services, enabling all of this very clearly in terms of what are the future is one area that will need to come into play. With respect to the entire aspect of employability, I think the gap continues and the gap will possibly widen. All of us very clearly understand at the policy advocacy level also, clearly the employability gap right now, what employable skills are only about 20%. And the relevance is only about 7%. So we're talking of a lot of gap that needs to be bridged. And how can we do this? I think we don't want to be putting the problem on the table. I think it's also an opportunity where research has got to be intensified. Research has got to be intensified by getting into the industry a little more now. How will it happen? I think the absorption will need to happen on both places. Get a lot of industry into academia and get a lot of academia into, get a lot of students into the industry as well. How will it work is something one needs to really develop a model for the next 2 years. I think that's going to be very crucial. The third dimension is going to be around continuous learning. I think, the entire academia can play a big role because the amount of continuous learning that will be needed will be far too high in terms of delivery, in terms of research, in terms of broad basing knowledge, etc., which the academia can build. A few minutes back, we spoke about how learning will span out in the corporate places. So there are a lot of gaps that's going to emerge, which the academia can take into play. It's not so academia has played a big role as far as entry-level population is concerned. I think at the middle level, they can contribute quite a bit where people go back. It's not that you support just the learning at the workplace or learning while they're working, but I think, it's also, you spoke about reskilling as well. So I think that's another area where they will need to come into play. So clearly, I think the focus is, message to the teaching one is research, industry, employability skills, new age industries. Clearly, they need to guide, I would also step a little more. I think looking at the entire GDP of the country, I think to encourage a lot of startups. I think that is what will actually accelerate or make the entire economy grow exponentially, because this is not going to be a sequential kind of a catch-up that we will need to do whenever it happens, 1 year, 2 years down the line. So we'll need a lot of startups and how will it really come together. And some of the curriculum will need to be challenged completely. A lot of redesigning and a lot of rewriting will need to come into play. So far as the students are concerned, I think they will need to really focus on a lot of hands-down research, lot of new areas which have come into play, which have no precedence whatsoever. So no borrowed knowledge at all. Yeah, they will need to multi-skill. I think they will possibly need to multi-skill at their best, because every single job has undergone something like 25 to 40% change with respect to the entire job description and the amount of skills that's needed, particularly facing the future. Continuous learning is an opportunity. Once they are in, they need to possibly plug and they need to be really continuously up and learning. Again, the graph needs to be very, very high. One area which again research will point out is the students community tend to give up a little and move more towards career transition. I think building a skill of not giving up is something which will come in very handy. and this is from an industry practicing manager kind of a view, that will help. I mean, that will definitely help. The purpose will need to be a little redefined. We'll need to get a little sharper. And I would encourage a lot of feedback to both, I mean, for the teaching staff and for the students community. The more and more they speak outside, and getting a lot of outside in views continuously is something that is going to help both this. I hope I've left adequate on the table for you to, consider.
So Adil, I'm going to ask you two questions actually. So for instance, teaching has changed, right? So now, earlier it was more classroom teaching. Now it has gone to Zoom and Google Hangouts or Teams. So what is the recommendation that you're going to give to teachers to upskill themselves? I have two questions for you. Question number one, because we're short on time. The second is, how do you ensure institutions build employability and employment?
So Tanaya, my classical answer, and Rajesh has, in a way answered even this question. He said it so well and so beautifully that it couldn't be far more different than what he has said. But it is very important to understand that you cannot win wars of tomorrow with weapons of yesterday or soldiers readied for a battle of the yesteryears to fight a battle of the future. So as simple as that, if we believe that we have just gone on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams and we are continuing to give the same syllabus to them, and we continue to do the same classroom sessions now on a different platform, and by virtue of that we believe that we have got digitized, let me just tell you, we are just, what is the Don Quixote quote? It says you are just shooting at the windmills, because it is not even touching the reality of what it is. So I believe that teachers and professors are so important in the whole game that unless they will pay and play their game right, the future of the entire journey is not going to be successful. So the most important thing is that industry should come and work very, very closely to upskill the teaching faculty about what the realities of the battle on the battlefield are about, because they are supplying to you the soldiers who you are using for fighting the battle in the markets. Now, if they themselves are not familiarized, they themselves are not familiar with the tools, the techniques, the methodologies, the ways we work, so it is for our own good that we work along with the academia, and I work along with so many at TIS and all the other institutes. We need to work so closely with them to upskill themselves and then work on the curriculum so that they are ready to be able to give the products which can deliver value to us. But just to say the products are not measuring up is, well, we are not in a restaurant that, we are ordering and they are supposed to give us. That doesn't work.
Okay. So now, Rajesh, now with Gen Z who are entering the organization with Gen X, and you have baby boomers. So what does academia build around these competencies?
So the question is, how does academia teach? How does academia deal with with Gen Z?
No. See, you are going to, as corporates, we're going to have Gen Z coming in. And
okay.
you also have baby boomers. So what do academicians really, how do they train their people to make them more future ready, more adaptable to the corporate world?
I think I'll give the benefit of this to, the industry readiness needs to be much more than the academia side. I think on the academia side, I think, we've spoken a lot about how to, give the new age skills. But yes, one thing we all realize is the entire aspect of the attention span and all that, smaller elements that we're coming into play. The biggest element for the entire enterprise success and the academia success is going to be coexistence. We've got to be very, very mindful about it. At both the levels, since the demographic shift is happening massively, we maybe a few months back assumed that there will be a complete displacement with the kind of digital that we're speaking about, that the entire, baby boomers will possibly get displaced by, some of the younger generation, and then upward cascading, and that will happen. No, I think there's got to be a lot of coexistence that has got to come in. Yeah. So the entire mindset of inclusion, that one needs to really coexist and not keep just rolling out, red carpets just for Gen Y and Gen Z and saying that this space does not belong to, the older generation. I think that entire racism in the corporate world will need to come into play. And I think when this Gen Y and Gen Z, possibly Gen Z, get into the workplace, they've got to be a little mindful about how this is going to happen, because 5 generations are going to work together, and the 6th generation is the machines as well. So 6 generations together of coexistence will call for huge amount of maturity and adoption and agility, and there's got to be a lot of flow. While I did speak about, digital literacy not being at the top, and digital literacy will need to flow through reverse mentoring, there's a lot of wisdom, care, and humanity that also flows from top in terms of experience. I think there's a sweet spot somewhere in between, and one will need to find. So I wouldn't put the entire stuff just on the academia. There's a lot of ownership on the industry side as well, and one would really need to do something together. And Adil spoke a lot and beautifully about the culture part of it. I think the culture will be at its test, at its best and test, when Gen Z really enters the workplace and when they start maturing up. They bring a lot of exponential value, but I think inclusion at the corporate level, at the industry level, and for them to really respect and believe that there's going to be a strata of people who are going to be really adding a lot of value to life and not just to work, I think will be the spirit of success.
Okay, so we really don't have much time. I have one question from Devi Nair. He says, how can a company ensure the overall welfare for their employees in the work from home mode? This is the question from Devi.
And I think actually we should use this opportunity, Tanaya, to push this question on to you, because just moderating is not going to be useful, and you as a successful professional, and particularly a successful one like the way you are, you should be answering this question.
Today I am the moderator, so today I have the chance of asking both of you.
No, you can, but please, I think you should contribute with your experience. What do you believe? How can the work from home be made more effective?
Look, I have worked with Accenture, so I have worked for 3.5 years. So the work from home has actually become fast. It's called telecommuting. As all you have to do is pick up your laptop, desktop, phone, because gadgets are becoming lesser and lesser. So even the allowances that people are giving out is become so much different. So today you have for modem allowance, you have for the chair, whether it's ergonomically designed. So I think organizations are seeing that change. In fact, they're wondering how it's going to be, because if you look at companies like Accenture, or for that matter Cap, a lot of them are encouraging the work from home. Even today, Indian organizations are encouraging the work from home. So so the things are changing. So like Adil was saying, from March 19th till now, I think it's been a complete paradigm shift. So that's my thinking, but you're the expert, so go on. So today I'm not the expert, I'm only the moderator, the poor moderator today.
Tanaya, what I feel is that people are slightly mistaken about work from home, because the experience that we have had in the last 2 months is not really very classical experience of work from home. This is a very peculiar situation. Suddenly it has been put onto the people. Suddenly the husband, wife, and the family, everyone is at home. And suddenly everyone wants to use the electronic gadgetry around the house. Plus the domestic servants are not there. So this classical experience that people are having in the last 2 months is not stereotypical of what a work from home as understood in its real concept is. The whole idea is that we are now having sufficient amount of technical capabilities and individual skill sets to be able to ensure that the value that each individual in his particular role is creating physically from the organization can now be created from any location. So why would you say only work from home, work from restaurant, work from hotel, work from anywhere else? The idea is that you don't need to be physically present in the physical premises of the office to perform the role of value creation. How organizations can make it real is, of course, this situation will change, and organizations will become far more efficient once they realize that they don't need to invest money in buying huge infrastructural facilities like buildings and offices, do them up, spend electric bills, have people traveling distances, and not be able to do. There will have to be certain structured policies which will regulate the work from home. And you don't need to, as I have seen most of the people trying to do this, every 15 minutes, the managers are calling up people to say, are you there? Have you done it? This is not how it works, but because it is the newness and lack of experience of working that these experiences are there. If you structure yourself, write out a proper policy, be more magnanimous, understand what is the purpose, and remember that if you keep watching time, you will get time back. If you look and focus on trying to create value from the people, you will get value back. Don't look at how many hours he's clocked in.
Agree, completely agree. Rajesh, you work with CAP, you work with technology companies.
Yeah. So I've worked on multiple industries. So very clearly, I think, I don't want to repeat what both of you said. I think you covered a lot of ground. There's got to be a lot of compassion on the organization side, not to fill up an employee's day's timetable. I mean, just because somebody has got 8 hours and 9 hours, you just fill it up with slots is being a little insensitive and is not the right way. And I fundamentally believe and practice that work is a subset of life and not the other way around. Not only in situations like this, one has got to really respect. And it is perfectly right for people also to stand up and say, I'm busy, I've got to do my stuff, or I've got to, something to cover this particular time. This appointment cannot be done, or this call cannot be done. I think employees also not to get stressed and stand up and convey the right reason and not give some other reason just because you always have this kind of a mindset that this time belongs to the office and I'm not supposed to be, doing something else. But, you're not supposed to be locked up in a room doing calls and doing this. So there's a lot of compassion and care that has got to flow. Management has got to realize that this is not, you don't fill up too many meetings and reviews all points of time just because you don't have anything else to do. I think that compassion will also need to come. At the same time, employees will need to stand up. I mean, people who are there, who are connected, will need to stand up, number one. And they've got to really invoke the trust as far as making this work right is concerned. So they've got to really encash it, use it well, and really, demonstrate the act of trust that will work. And finally,
also, Rajesh, also the fact that HR departments should not want to engage people in trying to run Rangoli competitions because they have got time and they don't know what to do. So you see, there is another logic I have heard, and the man says that if I am not busy and if my wife does not see that I am engaged for the whole day, then when I go back to work, she will ask me, how come now you are saying you are engaged for the whole day, but when you were at home, there were not 3 calls coming to you.
I saw that on WhatsApp University, Adil. Anyway, thank you very much, audience. You've been a great audience. Thank you, Adil. Thank you, Rajesh. If Adil is not speaking like this or not consulting, he's normally doing a lot of doodles that you can catch. And you can probably catch Rajesh in his, what is it called? The desert store? What is the bike called? Yeah, the desert store. Yeah.
The Gugu Man.
So thank you, everyone. It's been a brilliant session. I enjoyed myself. You can see a lot of compliments there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tanaya. And thanks, Adil.
Thank you, Tanaya. Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, organizers. Thank you, audience.